Y'all know by now that I'm a huge fan of Dracula, the historical figure of Vlad Dracula, the monster written in Bram Stoker's hit Gothic novel, and various different interpretations of him, including the famous Alucard from Helsing. Dracula is a character that I've followed with a devotion that is surprising, even to me. I think it's largely because he's a monster that I've really grown to appreciate. Historically, a noble and proud voivode who used harsh and frightful means to protect and war against those who threatened him and his lands, reimagined into a dark and horrifying monster who lives off the blood of the innocent, and finally brought back again into a noble yet dark figure who once again wages war against the forces of darkness, though still with a barbaric twist that makes him tantalizingly complex, but also very engaging. I love me some Dracula. So it may come to you as a surprise that I care very little for the Castlevania series. I tried watching the Netflix anime. I didn't really get into it. I never played any of the games. I know some of the lore, though, if that helps. In the Castlevania lore, and anyone's free to correct me if I'm wrong about this, before he was Dracula, he was Matthias Kronqvist. I hope I pronounced that right. A knight in service to Leon Belmont. Matthias was a great fighter and warrior who was devoted to his lord and his wife Elizabeth, who he loved dearly. However, when illness claimed her, Matthias cursed God directly, claiming it wasn't fair for God to demand so much of him and then show such cruelty by taking away such a perfect and innocent creature. Seeking a way to get back at God, Matthias searched for the Crimson Stone, which would allow him to gain eternal life as a vampire. To fuel the stone and achieve this, he manipulated another powerful vampire and his former friend Leon Belmont, and in the end he got his wish and became Vlad Dracula. He built a magical moving castle for himself in Romania and lived away from humans who only saw him as a monster. However, at one point he met a woman named Lisa, a doctor who he saw as similar to Elizabeth. Again, he fell in love, and so did she. They married and had a son named Alucard, but the townsfolk began to suspect Lisa's many medical practices were in fact witchcraft and had her crucified. Alucard was powerless to stop it, and Dracula himself was not made aware of it until after the fact, and when he learned, he was filled with grief and fury. Just like before, he blamed mankind for their evil and plotted his revenge against all of humanity for what had been done to Lisa. So, if you're keeping tally, that means he hates God and he hates humanity, so not a good look. And thus begins the Castlevania series. Now, I'm not familiar with all the games, and to go into every one of them would leave us here for probably hours, so let's just focus on the one that DBD wants to focus on, Castlevania 3. In 1476, Dracula has almost entirely destroyed the armors of the East Orthodox Church. However, he hears word of a general leading an army against him to the west known as Trevor Belmont, a descendant of Leon Belmont, his former ally. Interested to meet this descendant and see what the Belmont clan is like today, he elected to allow Trevor to reach him so he could dispatch the Belmonts for good. However, this arrogance proved his undoing. Crippled by the betrayal of Dracula and the death of his own love, Sarah, Leon Belmont, had instructed his kinsmen and descendants to devote themselves to killing Dracula and ending his evil, which Trevor intends to make good on, alongside his allies, a sorceress named Sifa Bellinades, and Alucard himself, Dracula's own son, who knew that his father had gone too far. Saddened by the betrayal of his son and furious at the evils of God and humanity, Dracula fought furiously against them, but in the end was defeated, only to be resurrected time and time again in later timelines to come back and challenge yet another Belmont. Dracula would finally be ultimately defeated in 1999 by Julius Belmont, the final descendant of the Belmont clan, although he would be reincarnated later as Soma Cruz, though Soma turns out to be a protagonist who uses his powers for far more productive and selfless means in the 21st century. So, said all that, but in the DBD lore, the big difference is that after being defeated by Julius, Dracula and his castle are taken to the realm of the entity. Oh, and it also leaves out Lisa. Just saying. Kind of weird, but hey, you do you, DBD. Now, I'll be honest, I was never that big on Dracula's interpretation in Castlevania. Don't get me wrong, the character's excellent. A man driven to grief so great that he curses heaven itself and turns his back on it only to become a monster. He embraces this monster side of himself and chooses to walk the path of the demon, bringing other monsters and creatures under his control. He tries once more to seek happiness only to lose it again and in turn transform him into the very monster he accused God of being. He's a monster born from a desire to get vengeance, but in the end his vengeance has turned him into the very thing he once cursed, a cruel and unfeeling dark lord. It's a beautiful irony. It's not that I have anything against the character. It's just wasn't the interpretation that I grew up with or studied. And the Netflix show didn't help much either. The way that God, faith, and the church are portrayed are grossly inaccurate for the time period, and it's another example of heavy bias against organized religion that I feel was not only unfair, but almost felt forced for the sake of creating the drama. I don't know if the games approached it the same way, but I almost laughed my ass off when Dracula presented himself as a man of science against the ignorant humans, only when he gets upset to summon fucking demons from hell. Yeah, what a man of science you are. And yeah, I know people love the show. It just wasn't my thing. So if you like the show, I'm glad you liked it. It just wasn't for me. So now that I've bored you to death with that, let's finally talk about his powers and perks, which, ooh, I do indeed love his powers. Dracula's power is Vampiric Shift, allowing Dracula to take on 3 different forms to hunt and destroy his prey. Dracula's 3 forms are Vampire, Wolf, and Bat. You can swap between forms by holding down the secondary power button and choosing a corresponding form. The Vampire form is Dracula's base form. With this form, Dracula moves at 4.6 meters per second, which is the standard killer speed. However, he also gains the Hellfire spell. In the Vampire form, hold down the primary power button, which will charge up your Hellfire spell. Release it to launch a line of fire pillars directly forward from which that will ignore obstacles and damage any survivor they hit. Mastering this ability is the bread and butter of the Vampire form, and it is so satisfying when you get the hit. This is unbelievable. This is actually unbelievable.
Thick Jamaican accent? Also, before that, you thought her name was Mildred? Okay, no.
The Wolf form grants various abilities. While in Wolf form, you can see pools of blood and scratch marks more clearly, and you also see scent orbs left behind by survivors running from you. Running into a scent orb will give you a haste status effect of 4% for 2 seconds, increasing your movement speed and charging your pounce attack. Further, survivors will trigger Killer Instinct if they perform a rush action near you. Once fully charged, the Wolf form gains a pounce attack much like the Demogorgon does, where Dracula can pounce up to 2 times to strike his prey. This pounce can be used to not only damage survivors, but also break pallets and walls.
Best friend. I'm gonna assume that Prince Eric caught and ate his fair share of flounder, unless this is one of those coastal kingdoms that doesn't consume fish, which, computer, yeah, those don't exist. The people who lived in that village, or town, or kingdom, or principality, most likely make their living fishing and trading. We already know that Prince Eric employed a chef who took personal, almost...
Now, the Bat form is perhaps the most unique, but also one of the most challenging to master. While in Bat form, you are undetectable and can also move much faster at 6 meters per second. Survivors are invisible to you, and you cannot attack them. However, you have the power to teleport to any window or pallet within 32 meters of you, and ignore pallet and window obstacles, flying right over them. You can see scratch marks easily, and the volume of running survivors is increased by 50%. You basically want to use this form to bamboozle or move around survivors to block them off from their escapes. Outplayed.
Oh, feet. Crabs have feet. Scuttle has feet. How much would you possibly have studied the culture you claim to be ready to join if feet and street are blind spots?
Crabs do not have feet, they have legs. Scuttle may have feet, but they are also webbed, unlike humans. And, more importantly, it's a song.
Dracula, in a simple word, is not easy. He's not an easy killer to master. You have to understand all 3 of his forms to truly master this one. The Vampire form excels at attacking survivors and using range attacks to mind game the prey. The Wolf form excels in tracking survivors and eliminating those that are playing stealthy. And the Bat form excels at stealth and cutting off means of escape for the enemy. To truly get the hang of Dracula, you need to get the hang of each form. So, Dracula also comes with 3 unique perks: Dominance, Hex Wretched Fate, and Human Greed. Dominance. This perk is okay in the early game, but honestly, I don't see much use with it other than for minor hex defense and boon obstruction. The first time a survivor interacts with a chest or totem, the entity will block the chest or totem for 16 seconds, and the aura of the blocked prop is revealed in white. Personally, I would change it to giving off a noise notification to let me know a little easier, because sometimes I don't notice a sudden aura change, but that's nitpicking. It's not a big deal. Dominance can be useful, so I don't hate this perk. It's just not as strong as I would like. Hex Wretched Fate. This perk is okay. It's fine. When a generator is completed, this perk activates. A random totem in the trial will become a hex totem and curse the obsession. The obsession's repair speed will be reduced by 33%. The hex totem in question will be revealed to the obsession within 12 meters. I personally like the idea of this hex, but I think there should be a little more to it. Like, maybe only the afflicted survivor can cleanse the totem and all other survivors can't, or maybe it affects all survivors who completed the generator. I just feel like this perk needs a little extra, but for what it is, it works fine. I don't hate it. It's okay. I just feel like there could be a bit more added. And then finally, Human Greed. This perk is strange, but it's also very useful. You have the ability to close open chests. You also have the ability to see the auras of survivors who come within 8 meters of a chest for 3 seconds. I guess would be a neat perk since it's a lot like Weave Attunement, right? You can use the location of chests to always know where survivors are, and that can be very useful, absolutely. The problem is that the aura reading is only 3 seconds long, unlike Weave Attunement, which has no time limit. And not only that, but not all survivors will even bother with chests, so you're taking a gamble that survivors will even interact with a chest, given the perk's value. But with that said, sometimes a survivor can't help but run near a chest to get away from you or to move around the map, so sometimes you can still use it like Weave Attunement, and since survivors can't pick up a chest or move a chest out of the way, they have no choice but to suffer the aura revealed. So Human Greed is an odd one, but it can also be very useful. Although I'll admit, I've never been able to just close a chest. I've never had that happen before, but hey, you know what? I think that's partially because some survivors just don't ever interact with chests, which is kind of the big weakness of Human Greed, but otherwise, it's a pretty neat perk. And that sums up everything about Dracula. Oh boy, I've been looking forward to making this video for a while because I love Dracula, and he's definitely my main right now in Dead by Daylight as a killer player. But now that we're done with Dracula, we got to talk about the survivor that came out with him, Trevor Belmont. We will be talking about Trevor, and yes, I know, because I'm not a big Castlevania person, this is going to be a little harder for me to talk about, but I will do my research as I am wont to do, so this may take a little bit of time, but look forward to that, and I'll see you next time in the fog. Take care.